The rain began an hour before sunset, hard and merciless. Washing the streets of San Antonio clean of color. It fell on the white roses outside St. Cecilia's Church, on the black cars lined up like silent guards, and on the woman standing barefoot at the edge of the highway, her wedding dress torn, her mascara running down her face like war paint. Isabella Cruz didn't know where she was going, only that she couldn't go back. Behind her, sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Ahead, the road curved into darkness. Her hands still trembled from what she'd done, the blood that wasn't hers on her skin, the echo of a man's voice still clawing at her ears. "You'll never leave me." Issa, never. But she had barely. Now she was nothing but a ghost in silk, running barefoot through the storm. She didn't notice the headlights until they were right on her. A car. Black. Sleek, engine humming like a beast. Brakes screamed. Tires hissed. She turned, blinded by the light. The car stopped inches from her. The door opened. A man stepped out. Tall. Black coat. Dark hair slicked back from the rain. His presence filled the night like smoke, calm, dangerous, inevitable. "Jesus," he muttered, looking her over. "You trying to die?" She backed away. "Stay away from me." "Relax," he said, raising his hands slightly. "I'm not your problem. Then drive." He tilted his head, studying her. The wet dress clinging to her, the cut on her cheek, the fear in her voice. He didn't move. "What happened to you?" "Nothing." That's a lot of nothing for someone covered in blood. She said nothing. The man sighed, his tone softening. "Get in the car before someone worse finds you." She hesitated. "Who are you?" "Someone who doesn't like leaving broken things on the road." His voice carried no threat but no mercy either, and for reasons she couldn't name. She believed him. The car was warm. The silence inside it was heavier than the storm. He drove without speaking, his eyes fixed on the road. After a while he said, "You running from him?" Her pulse jumped. "You don't even know who he is." "I know the look," he said. "The kind that comes from men who mistake love for possession." She stared at him. "You talk like you've been one." He smirked faintly. "Maybe I was, once. Did she survive?" His eyes darkened. "No." The rain thudded harder against the windows. They drove until the lights of the city disappeared behind them, replaced by the hum of crickets and the smell of wet earth. Finally, he turned off onto a dirt road, winding through the outskirts until the headlights fell on a large gated estate. She tensed. "Where are we?" "Safe," he said. "I don't believe in that word anymore." "Then call it dry," he replied. Stepping out, the gate opened automatically. When she didn't move, he leaned down, his face close enough for her to see the faint scar across his jaw. "You can stay in the car," he said softly. "Or you can walk into the rain again. Either way, I'm not stopping you." She met his gaze. "What's your name?" "Luciano Vega." Her breath caught. The name was whispered in the underworld like a prayer and a curse. "The Cartel Lord?" He smiled without warmth. "That depends who's asking. And you brought me here?" "You brought yourself," he said. "I just happened to be in your way." Inside the house, everything smelled of cedar and smoke. The lights were low, the air heavy with quiet. She followed him through the hallway, her soaked dress leaving a trail of water on the marble floor. He led her to a guest room, enormous, untouched. A fireplace burned low in the corner. "There's a shower," he said, "and clothes in the closet. They'll fit." She frowned. "You keep women's clothes here?" "I keep everything here," he said simply, "including secrets." She didn't ask what kind. When she emerged from the shower, wearing a plain black sweater and jeans, he was waiting in the sitting room, pouring whiskey into 2 glasses. She sat opposite him, the firelight flickering between them. He handed her a glass. "You want to tell me who you're running from?" "No, fair." He took a sip, watching her over the rim. "You've got good aim." She blinked. "What?" He nodded toward her hands. "That cut." "It's from a gun kick." Her breath hitched. "You notice everything, don't you?" "It's my job to. What's mine then?" He smiled faintly. "Right now." Breathing. For a long while. They said nothing, just the crackle of the fire, the rain outside, The quiet between two people who'd both run too far from what they once were. Finally, she whispered, "He would have killed me. Did you kill him first?" Her eyes met his. Would it matter? He studied her, the steel behind the shaking, the fight under the fear. "No," he said. "It wouldn't." She looked down at her hands. "What happens now?" "That depends on what? Whether the man you're running from realizes who found you." She froze. "And who did?" He smiled slightly, the firelight catching in his eyes. "The one he's too afraid to cross." She didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the house felt like footsteps. Every flicker of shadow like memory come alive. But when she finally drifted off just before dawn, she dreamed of him. Of the man who'd stopped his car for a stranger in a wedding dress, who spoke of violence like it was a language he hated but couldn't unlearn. She didn't know what terrified her more, that he'd saved her, or that she might already belong to him. The next morning broke hot and gray. Sunlight cutting through the storm clouds like tired blades. Isabella Cruz woke to the smell of coffee and silence. The bed beneath her was too soft, the sheets too clean. It felt wrong, like comfort borrowed from someone else's world. She sat up slowly, her hair damp against her neck, her heartbeat still caught between fear and disbelief. The house was vast and quiet. When she stepped into the hallway, her bare feet sank into carpet that cost more than her old car. Downstairs, Luciano Vega was waiting. He stood by the tall windows overlooking the yard, a stretch of green bordered by stone walls and desert beyond. He wore black again. He always wore black. "You sleep?" he asked without turning. "A little. Nightmares?" "Something like that." He turned, one brow raised. "You get used to them. Doesn't sound like advice." "It's not." She hesitated. "You always this kind?" He smiled faintly. "Only before breakfast." The kitchen was enormous, more marble, more silence, more distance than she knew what to do with. Luciano poured coffee, black and bitter. "You eat?" "I'm not hungry." "Eat anyway." "Do you always order people around?" "Only when they look like they haven't eaten in days." She wanted to argue, but her body betrayed her. Hunger was louder than pride. As she ate, he leaned against the counter, studying her with that calm, unnerving stillness she was beginning to hate. Finally, she said, "You going to tell me why you helped me?" "You were standing in the middle of the road in a wedding dress," he said. "I figured God sent you as a test. And did you pass?" He smiled, slow. "I haven't decided yet." For most of the day, she stayed in the room he'd given her, sitting by the window and watching the men outside patrol the grounds. They wore no uniforms, but their movements were identical, alert, disciplined. Soldiers disguised as silence. She saw it now. This wasn't a home. It was a fortress. When she finally gathered the courage to step outside, one of the men followed her without speaking. "Don't worry," Luciano said when he found her in the garden, his voice almost amused. "They're not watching you. They're watching who might come for you." Her stomach tightened. "You think they will?" "I don't think." "I know. Then why keep me here?" "Because no one touches what's under my roof." She stared at him. "So I'm what?" "Your guest." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "For now." That evening, she heard him on the phone. His voice was low, sharp, all control. "Find out which one of Delgado's men went to the church. I want names. I want their blood before sunset tomorrow." The words hit her like glass. When he noticed her in the doorway, he ended the call without emotion. "You shouldn't eavesdrop. You're going to kill them," she said quietly. "Yes, they're already dead. Not by my hand." She stepped closer. "You think that matters?" He studied her face, something unreadable flickering behind his eyes. "To me, it does." Later, they sat in the study, whiskey between them, firelight moving across the shelves. Luciano said, "You're from the north side." "I can tell by the accent." She nodded. "Laredo. And him?" "Carlos Delgado," she said, the name tasting like iron. "My father's business partner. He made me marry his son to pay off their debt." Luciano's jaw tightened. "How old are you?" 24. "And how old was he?" 38. "Did he hurt you?" She looked down. Every day he didn't was worse. Luciano didn't move, but the air changed, heavier, colder. You shot him? She nodded slowly. In the chest. You sure he's dead? I hope so. He poured more whiskey into her glass. Then drink. You earned it. Hours passed. The storm came back, soft this time, whispering against the windows. Luciano sat back in his chair, watching the flames. You think this is over now? I don't think anything's over, she said. He smiled faintly. Good, you're learning. You talk like someone who doesn't believe in peace. I don't, he said. Peace is what comes after the noise. It doesn't last. And what comes after peace? Debt, he said simply. Her pulse quickened. And what do I owe you? He looked at her for a long time. That depends. On what? Whether you stay. She swallowed hard. And if I go? Then I'll send a car behind you to make sure you make it far enough. Far enough to what? To pretend you didn't die tonight. She stood, heart pounding. You're trying to scare me. He shook his head. No, I'm trying to prepare you. For what? For the moment you stop being someone's victim and start being someone's weapon. Her breath caught. And what if I don't want to be either? He smiled. Small. Sad. Then you're already halfway free. That night, she couldn't sleep. Outside, thunder rolled low over the hills. And she could hear his voice echo faintly from downstairs, speaking to men, giving orders, building walls of violence around a heart she suspected hadn't beaten right in years. She stood by the window, whispering to herself, You don't belong here. But the truth that came next was harder to silence. Then why do you feel safer here than you ever did in your own home? The rain returned 3 nights later, softer now, steady, almost tender. The kind of rain that made San Antonio glow in half-light, the city breathing slowly under its silver veil. Inside Luciano Vega's mansion, silence moved like a living thing. Guards whispered into radios. Doors stayed closed. And in the heart of it all, Isabella Cruz lay awake, eyes open to the ceiling, listening to the rain beat against her window. Sleep hadn't come since that night. Not since the gunshot. Not since she saw blood bloom across white silk. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw it again, the face of the man she'd killed. Her husband's eyes wide with shock and fury. His hand still reaching for her as he fell. And then another image began to haunt. Her. Luciano single quotes, S. His face in the firelight. The way he watched her like he already knew what she'd done. Like he'd done it. 2. The next morning, she found him outside near the stables. No guards. No suit. Just black jeans, a gray shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. He was fixing the gate himself, hands scarred, muscles moving beneath old ink. He looked up when he felt her approach. Couldn't sleep either? She shook her head. I keep hearing things. You're safe here, he said. Safe doesn't mean silent. He smiled faintly. You have a way with words. Old habit, she said, folding her arms. Talking kept me alive. I'd say shooting did. Her breath caught. You knew. Of course I knew. Then why didn't you tell anyone? He looked at her, his gaze quiet but sharp. Because you didn't kill a man. You killed your cage. She didn't know whether to thank him or scream. And what would you know about cages? He picked up a wrench, turned it in his hand, then said, Mine had gold bars. That afternoon, a black car arrived at the gate. The guards tensed. Luciano's right-hand man, Mateo Alvarez, met him at the porch. It's Delgado's cousin, he said. He's asking questions. Luciano's voice stayed calm. Then he's digging his own grave. Word's spreading fast, boss, Mateo continued. They're saying the girl killed him. They're saying she ran to you. Luciano exhaled slowly. Let them talk. Should I shut them up? Not yet. Isabella overheard everything from the top of the stairs. When Luciano came inside, she was waiting. You knew this would happen. Yes, you used me. He stopped, eyes narrowing. Careful! Careful! She snapped. You could have turned me in, but you didn't. You brought me here. Why? So they'd come for me instead of you? His tone darkened. I don't hide behind women. Then what do you hide behind, Señor Vega? He stepped closer, his voice quiet and dangerous. You think I'm your enemy? I think I'm your distraction. Something flickered in his eyes. Anger, maybe pain. You are neither. Then tell me what I am. He hesitated, his voice low. A problem I don't know how to solve. The rain turned heavier. Thunder rolled across the hills. Luciano poured himself a drink, his hands steady despite the tension in the air. You think you're the first person I've helped? He said, I think I'm the first one who's made you feel guilty for it. He looked at her, really looked at her. You think you know what guilt looks like? I've lived with it, she whispered. He leaned forward. So have I. What did you do? He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Everything. They stayed like that for a long time, two broken people bound by secrets too heavy to say out loud. Finally, he said, your husband wasn't the only one who wanted you dead. She froze. What do you mean? Delgado's debt wasn't only to me. He owed others bigger names. When you ran, you took what he promised them. I didn't take anything. He nodded. You did, yourself. Her heart stilled. You're saying I'm worth money? He poured another drink. More than you know. That night she found the folder. He'd left it on his desk, open as if waiting for her. Inside were photos, names, documents. One of the photos stopped her cold. Her standing in her wedding dress outside the church. And next to her, a note scrawled in black ink. Do not let her leave the property. Her throat tightened. He'd known she would find it. He wanted her to. When she confronted him, he was sitting by the fire again. You're keeping me prisoner, she said. No, he replied softly. I'm keeping you alive. By locking me up? By making sure the world doesn't find you before I can end it. You think that makes you my savior? No, he said. It makes me your punishment. Her voice trembled. I don't understand you. He met her gaze. You will. Later, when she couldn't sleep, she found herself outside his door. She told herself it was to argue again, to demand freedom, to demand the truth. But when she opened the door, the words died in her throat. He was asleep on the couch, a half-empty glass beside him. The stormlight flickering over his face. Without the mask of control, he looked almost human, almost breakable. She stood there for a long time, then whispered, What are you hiding from, Luciano Vega? He stirred slightly, murmured something in his sleep. Her name, her heart stuttered. She stepped back, closing the door quietly. Because the truth terrified her more than the men who wanted her dead. She wasn't afraid of Luciano Vega. She was afraid of what she was beginning to feel for him. And she knew, when he found out, it would destroy them both. The sun never rose that morning. It was buried beneath a wall of gray clouds, a storm creeping in from the Gulf, the kind that turned the air heavy, the kind that made men nervous and women remember things they'd tried to forget. Isabella Cruz woke to the sound of shouting in the courtyard. She pulled on a sweater and went to the window. The guards were running, guns drawn, voices low but urgent. Trucks were being moved. Radios crackled with static and panic. Something was wrong. She found Luciano Vega downstairs, already dressed, his sleeves rolled, a pistol holstered at his side. The look on his face was the same she'd seen once before. Calm over chaos. What's happening? She asked. He didn't look up from the map spread across the table. Delgado's men found us. Her stomach turned. How? Someone talked. Who? That's what I'm about to find out. He grabbed a file, tossed it to Mateo, and said, Move the cars to the north gate. Get Alvarez and the others ready. Nobody comes in or out without my say. Mateo nodded. Left. Luciano finally met her eyes. You stay here. No, this isn't a debate. She took a step closer, her voice trembling. If they're coming for me, hiding doesn't help. His jaw tightened. You think this is about you? It is. He slammed his palm against the table. The maps fluttered. It's about control. Delgado's cousin doesn't care if you're alive or dead. He cares what it looks like if I protect you. She held his gaze. Then let me decide what I'm worth dying for. He stared at her for a long moment, the rain outside starting to fall again, soft but steady. Then quietly he said, You sound like her. She frowned. Who? He hesitated. The only woman I ever tried to save. What happened to her? He looked away. I didn't. By noon, the estate was a fortress. Men took positions on rooftops. Black SUVs formed a wall near the gate. The air smelled like oil, sweat, and thunder. Luciano stood at the window, radio pressed to his ear, giving orders with quiet precision. Isabella watched from across the room. The calm in him wasn't peace. It was rage disguised as discipline. "You've done this before," she said softly, "too many times. Then you know how it ends." He turned, his voice low. "Yes, with someone buried. Who?" He smiled faintly. "Ask me tomorrow." The first shot came at dusk, a sharp crack from beyond the wall. Then another. Then chaos. Men shouted. The radios erupted with static and gunfire. Luciano moved instantly. No hesitation, no fear. "Keep her inside." He barked. Isabella froze by the window as shadows moved beyond the rain, trucks, dozens of them. The gate burst open. Luciano drew his weapon and turned to her. "Down!" She dropped to the floor just as bullets ripped through the windows. Glass shattered across the room. "Move!" he shouted, grabbing her wrist, pulling her through the hallways. They ducked behind marble pillars, sprinted through corridors now echoing with gunfire. He led her down the back stairs, into the basement, concrete walls, emergency lights flickering. She gasped for breath. "How many?" "Too many. Then you can't fight them all." He met her eyes, his expression unreadable. "I don't need to." "Then what?" He cut her off with a kiss. Hard, urgent, the kind that tasted like desperation and goodbye. When he pulled away, his hand lingered against her cheek. "Whatever happens," he said quietly, "you don't open that door until you hear my voice. Luciano, promise me." She shook her head. "Don't do this, promise me." Tears filled her eyes. "I can't lose someone else." He smiled, broken. "Then don't love someone like me." He was gone before she could answer. The door slammed shut. The sound of gunfire roaring overhead. She waited, heart pounding, breath shallow until she couldn't anymore. Then she broke her promise. The house was a battlefield. Smoke filled the halls. The air reeked of gunpowder and rain. She found him near the courtyard, crouched behind a stone pillar, firing at the men flooding through the front gate. Blood ran down his arm, but his movements were still precise, mechanical. "Go back!" he shouted when he saw her. "No!" "Isabella, I'm not leaving you!" Before he could argue, one of Delgado's men lunged from behind the wall. She reacted without thinking, grabbed the fallen gun at her feet and fired. The man dropped. Luciano turned, staring at her. "You shouldn't have seen that." She met his gaze, trembling. "Then stop making me." The battle lasted minutes that felt like years. By the time it ended, the rain had turned red in places. The courtyard was silent except for thunder. Luciano staggered, a fresh wound blooming across his side. Isabella caught him before he fell. "You're bleeding. I've been worse." "Stop pretending that's strength." He laughed weakly. "You're bossier than my guards." She pressed her hands against the wound, tears mixing with rain. "Don't joke." He touched her wrist. "You're shaking, because I don't know what to do if you die." He looked at her, eyes dimming, voice soft. "Then don't let me." She pulled him close, whispering, "I won't." And when she kissed him again, it wasn't desperation, it was defiance, a vow made in blood and thunder. They survived the night, barely. By dawn, the estate was quiet again. The air was thick with smoke, grief, and exhaustion. Luciano sat in the ruined courtyard, bandaged, silent. Isabella stood beside him, watching the sunrise burn the rain away. He said quietly, "They'll come again, I know. Then you should go." She looked at him. "And leave you here to die?" He met her gaze. "You're not built for this." "You made sure of that," she said softly. "Now you'll have to live with it." For the first time he smiled, small, tired, real. "You're not afraid of me anymore." "No," she said. "You're afraid of me." He stood slowly, wincing. "So what now, mi novia fugivia?" She smiled faintly. "Now we stop running." He tilted his head. "You think peace exists for people like us?" She took his hand, fingers trembling but sure. "Maybe not peace, but maybe something close enough." The morning light hit his face, scarred, bruised, human. And for a moment, he looked almost like the man he might have been before the world taught him to kill. The world outside the Vega. A state had already forgotten the war. The news said it was a gang dispute. The police said nothing. The people said less. That's how cities survive, by pretending not to see what bleeds for their silence. But Isabella Cruz saw everything. She stayed through the cleanup. Through the smoke and the blood and the silence that followed when a house full of killers suddenly had no one left to fight. By the second week, the guards were gone. By the third, the house was half empty. Only Luciano remained, and her. He healed slowly, like a man trying to learn what it meant to live again. His shoulders still ached when it rained, his steps still careful, but the rest of him was quieter now. Every morning, he sat outside on the stone steps, watching the sun rise over the fields. Isabella would bring him coffee, sit beside him, and they'd pretend for a few minutes that they were normal. No cartel. No blood. Just two people who'd survived too much and didn't know what to do with the silence that followed. "You could leave," he said one morning, his voice still rough from the wounds. "There's money. A car, papers. You could start over anywhere." She looked at him. "And you?" "I stay. Doing what?" He smiled faintly. "Trying to make peace with the ghosts." "You think they'll forgive you?" He sipped his coffee, eyes on the horizon. "I don't think forgiveness is for me." She was quiet for a long time. Then she said softly, "Maybe it's not about being forgiven. Maybe it's about learning how to forgive yourself." He turned to her, something breaking open behind his eyes. "And what about you, mi novia fugitiva? Have you forgiven yourself?" She took a breath, let the words settle. "Not yet. But I'm getting closer." By summer, the house felt like it belonged to someone else. Sunlight where gunfire used to be. Laughter echoing faintly in halls that once knew only commands. Luciano stopped giving orders. He started fixing things, the gate, the roof, the old piano in the sitting room that hadn't worked in years. It was strange, watching a man like him learn how to be gentle. Stranger still to realize she trusted him now. One night, when the sky was clear and the cicadas hummed, she sat beside him on the porch, barefoot. Her hair loose for the first time since the wedding she never finished. "You ever wonder what comes after all this?" she asked. He smiled. "No one in my line of work gets an after. You're not in that line anymore." He looked down at his hands, scarred, calloused. "These don't forget." She reached for them anyway, her fingers brushing the ridges where knives and bullets had left their marks. "Then maybe you just need new memories to cover the old ones." He looked at her. And for a heartbeat, he wasn't the cartel lord who'd built an empire. He was just a man who'd lost everything but the chance to start again. A few weeks later, she found him in the study, burning old files in the fireplace. Names, accounts, maps, everything that had once made him powerful. When she asked why, he said simply, "Because if I keep them, I'll start thinking like him again." "Like who?" "The man I was before I met you." She smiled softly. "And who are you now?" He looked at her, quiet. "A man who finally understands what he's done." At dusk, they drove out past the city, just the two of them. The open road stretching into gold and dust. The air smelled of cedar and summer heat. Music played low on the radio. An old Spanish ballad about lovers who never learned how to say goodbye. Luciano's hand rested on the steering wheel, his other reaching out, almost without thought, to find hers. "You ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't stopped that night?" he asked. She smiled. "I'd be dead." He glanced at her. "Or married. Same thing." He laughed quietly, the first real laugh she'd heard from him. "You always were impossible. You like impossible." He looked back at the road, his voice soft. "Yeah, I do." They reached a small town by the river before nightfall, a quiet place where no one recognized them, where the only sound was the rustle of trees and the water running slow. Luciano parked by the bank, stepped out and lit a cigarette. The lighter's flame caught his face in soft orange light. Older now, but human again. Isabella stood beside him, her dress fluttering in the wind. "So this is it," she said. "This is what?" "The part where we pretend we're just two people who took a wrong turn and ended up free." He smiled faintly. "Maybe it's not pretending anymore." She stepped closer, her hand brushing his chest where the bullet scar still pulsed faintly beneath the fabric. "Does it still hurt?" "Only when I breathe, then keep breathing." He caught her hand, brought it to his lips, gentle, reverent. "You saved me, mi novia fugitiva." She smiled, eyes bright with unshed tears. No, you just finally let someone try. When dawn came, they didn't drive back. They didn't plan. They didn't run, they stayed. The world would forget their names. The city would move on. But somewhere in the heart of Texas, two people who should have been enemies learned what came after violence. It wasn't peace. It wasn't forgiveness. It was love, raw, imperfect, and alive. And for them, that was enough. As the sun rose over the river, Luciano Vega whispered the words he'd never said to anyone. You weren't my mistake, Isabella. You were my salvation. She smiled through tears, leaned into him, and said, Then let's start again before the world remembers who we were. He kissed her. Slow, sure, eternal, a promise without language. And for the first time, the runaway bride didn't run. She stayed. The end.